Hi, my name is Serena, and I'm from the US, but I've been living in Asia for almost 6 years now. And my home is the Philippines for the last 2 years. And before that, I lived in Malaysia for 3.5 years. And my journey into Asia was one that took me from this bi-coastal lifestyle in the US between New York and California for quite a few years, and eventually to a place in the mountains in Massachusetts, where only after a few months of working there I was struck by lightning while doing a wilderness first responder course. And there was about a room of 15 other people around, and they were the ones who witnessed it. So I didn't really know what had happened to me. I just was there with that, and they saw it. So that made it real. And in a short time after that, I had lost my job, and I was living where I was working. So I one day at the end of a session of students that were there for their summer camp program was brought to the director's office, where he handed me a piece of paper that was 2 pages back and front, and filled up with a bunch of exaggerations and quite a few manipulated lies of what had been happening while I was there. And then after that gave me another notice, and it was saying I had until 5 p.m. that day to vacate the premises, and it was already 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So he was giving me 4 hours to pack up my life and then just suddenly leave this job that I was supposed to have for the next 1.5 years. And I didn't really know what to do, so I jumped on an airplane, went to California, and within another month was moving to Malaysia because I applied for a job and didn't really know why I shouldn't apply, because there was nothing holding me back. So it was okay to just apply for a job in Malaysia and see what happens. When I got the position, and there was a lot of synchronicity in that, it just made sense to go. So then I ended up in Malaysia, and it was only 3 months after I was struck by lightning, and landed there at the start of monsoon season. And Kuala Lumpur is a city that has some of the most grounded lightning strikes and compared to any other city in the world. And so the intensity of those thunderstorms is pretty incredible, and a lot of energy was surging through my body. And there were many experiences of having intense headaches right before a storm, and as soon as the storm would pass, it would go away. Other moments when I could feel electricity surging through me because the lightning would be striking my building or someplace really close outside. And many other moments when energy when it wasn't necessarily grounded in a way that I felt resonant with inside of myself, would start just causing light bulbs to go out, or trying to do something and then finding that now that fuse doesn't work, or kind of crazy electricity things that would just happen. And then I was introduced to some yoga community people that were familiar with this thing called inner dance, and they had invited me to participate in a energy playtime one Saturday morning. And since I wasn't working, I usually worked on Saturdays, but I was off that Saturday. It was a holiday, which was really convenient because I could go participate. And in this first inner dance session, I had this really, really intense electricity experience where my whole body went into this state of electricity, similar to being struck by lightning, but maybe 3 or 4 times stronger than the lightning strike itself, where it went radiating through my entire body. And I didn't know that other people weren't experiencing that, because we weren't given any guidelines or any introduction into what inner dance actually is. So I laid down and thought that maybe that was what everyone was experiencing. So if that's the case, then okay, fine. Like, it's really, really intense. So to come out of that experience and then to really, really feel connected to this process that seemed to be giving me a space to look at myself in a way that I hadn't been able to process. After being struck by lightning, I felt like I had been bounced into all of these really intense electricity experiences without having a chance to process the lightning strike itself. And especially because I knew it was going to happen. I had a couple of visions in years prior to when the lightning strike actually happened, but in one vision, the lightning was coming down out of the sky on a sunny day, and it hit me right at my third eye point, and then everything went blank, and I was just there in that dream space, breathing in darkness, but in complete sense of it being also everything, and not death, but everything, and you're just breathing into the nothingness. And then it was almost like that space in the dream being in this way of feeling like, are you dead or are you actually super, super alive, was almost like a question. Are you ready? Or do you get it? Do you get that this is it? Okay, I get it. So, okay. So you don't really think about it after things like that happen. You let it sit and you digest it in a way of like, whoa, that was intense. Like, is that really real? I can't really look at that. I have no idea what that means. It's not the first time it's even been a lightning strike dream, so maybe no. But when it actually happened years later, then yeah, it made a lot of sense. So, okay, now I've got that to process on top of the other things that were synchronistically connected to that happening, and to other relatives it happened to, and then losing your job and moving to this country where there's intense thunderstorms, and then trying to ground yourself in a way that you can just feel like you belong in this place where you don't know many people, and a lot of other events have happened in which people have gotten hurt or have been in the hospital for long periods of time, and they're your closest friends, and now you don't really know, you don't know. So I appreciated the inner dance. It was something more than what yoga could give me, and I was happy with my yoga, but this was easy in a way. It felt really intense to be in it, but if all you had to do is lay down and then listen to some music, that's pretty easy. So I kept doing it, and then within a few more months I did a teacher's training, and I think it was then that I had really connected with an awareness that, that first inner dance, that was exactly 1 year after I was struck by lightning, and there seems to be a lot of this electricity talk in this inner dance thing, so there's some connection to it. There's something happening in this. I think I'll keep going and see what happens. It seems to make sense. There's something that we're talking about in all of this. It relates to the chakras, it relates to these color patterns. I get it, I get the color patterns, and maybe there's something more. And then only after another couple of years or so of being involved in the inner dance process did I understand why those colors made so much sense, why the presentation of those colors was not something new to me. But when I was 19, there was a moment that I had, and it was another part of the awakening process in a way that psychedelics can really expand things in a very short amount of time, in a way that you're knowing yourself more deeply, especially if what your connection to with this psychedelic thing is philosophy and this expression of consciousness, and really deeply getting it, not in it for any hallucination or anything other than what is real. What is this that is real? What is it that I know about this? Because I do get it, and something in me is speaking this, not because it's intelligent or it is based from knowledge, but there's something wisdom in it, there's something vibrational in it, and there's something that isn't speaking through words but color. And it was speaking through the colors, and the colors were so vibrant, I had to sit and draw out the colors and just draw them, and they were like these smoky waves of color that it wasn't that I was seeing it, but I was feeling it, and I needed to draw it so that I could just visualize what it was that I was feeling. And that eventually turned into these patterns that were connected to primary colors and secondary colors, and the weaving of these things that looked like unity of two things that could have been expressed as duality, but I saw them as pluralities that were also held in a triangular form with something in the middle that integrated these two things and allowed it to become something new, something more human or more complete or more accessible in a way that it was centered. It was an integration point. And this eventually turned into a theory that I was drawing out. It felt like the most simple thing, and that this most simple of forms was not really based on form. It was something on flow and pattern, and to recognize that there is a pattern in this most simple of structures really connected me to an aspect of simplicity that I could start to hold and to ground into, because it felt like it could unfold so many of the different things that weren't a part of the foundations, that the foundations were this. And so if everything else could be also this simple, then maybe some of these emotions that I hold and these things that I have as a tension or an anxiety or as a judgment on myself or an insecurity, maybe these are things that I could start to let go of, because I see it as something so much easier than this. Within another few months of that unfolding, I finally had a chance to sit down with it. It kept on asking me to look at it deeper. Look at this, write it out, just sit with it one day, just do it, because you're writing it, you get it. So what is it, draw it. Okay, let me draw out the pattern. And so I did in my notebook, and I drew it out on one whole page, and I saw it, and I was like, okay, I get it. That's the end in some way, and then these things are the beginning. I have no idea what's in between. There's so many other things in between. So what that is, like, we'll look at it. It's beautiful, but I don't know what it is. There's so much else that goes from these seated points of vibration within color and what that looks like into what this looks like. So when I first saw the flower of life and connected it to the colors and was going through this process of integrating what that was, I remembered this pattern. And I had gone into the pattern many times in ways where I could find atoms and other sacred geometry and things that if I just studied it long enough, staring at it, playing with it, using a ruler with it, then things started to pop out. And so when I saw the flower of life and then saw that what it was that I was drawing was the flower of life, but also with the geometry in it, it was really strange, but in a way that of course, that must be it, because it made so much sense, even if you don't know what it is that you're drawing. And yet now, when I talk with people, when I go into dialogue with people, when I'm sharing with them about this theory, and I'm drawing out this pattern, and they're able to see so much from themselves in the thing that's being shared, it's making sense. Something is clicking. They don't get it. They're scientists and biologists and theorists and working a lot with the mind, and all of these NYU people are very connected to that, the answers to the questions instead of the questions themselves. If I come along and present it from this very social science side of things and look at what is the question and what is it that we can't answer but we can continue to ask questions about, it was quite trippy for people. Even at that time, there was that sense of, we need to document this, and maybe you should share about your life because there's something interesting that you're saying. And it very much seemed like it was just not the time. It wasn't the time. I had no idea what I was talking about. I didn't know what this picture was or how it related to anything. Now it makes a lot more sense. There's a lot more integration at this point. But that was a big part of where does something now move into a place where you're able to express it and use your words or use your consciousness as a way to express your words that maybe wasn't there when I was younger. And yet this didn't start even then, but started when I was much younger. Awakening isn't something that happens once, and it isn't something that happens and then stops. If when you feel that there's awakening or enlightenment, and then allow yourself to be an achievement, you stop. You stop any of it because you've achieved the thing that you think it is. But achievement isn't real. And so you can't achieve awakening, you can't achieve enlightenment. There's only this constant process of going deeper into it, of allowing yourself to become more whole in a way that you unfold all of the different constructs and pieces that have been placed there based on either society or culture or worldview, and allow yourself to deconstruct all of these parts. That the more that you deconstruct yourself, the more you feel that you're connected to the wholeness, but the more that you then find that there's more to deconstruct. That maybe you're not deconstructing yourself quite as much, but that in that process of what is enlightenment, it's not fair to have it just for yourself. If also you have awakenings when you're young, why would you keep it for yourself? How are you supposed to be this being of such beautiful intuition and knowing and love and compassion for all of it, and then just hold on to that? It asks to be shared. It asks to be held in service in a way that it can bring to others what it is that it knows. And so for me, this was something I understood when I was really young. I knew that my life was meant to be something based on healing and of giving and of service that was connected to how all of this sense of being was, and how that would actually bring something in a way that I didn't need to do it, and I wasn't bringing anything. It was just me, but that I was actually connected to that. It wasn't easy to be so weird being young and having this sense that you're speaking a different language, even if it's the same language, or that maybe it's just because you're little and so they don't get you, and that's okay. They're saying, oh, you're just little, like you're not making any sense. And okay, that's fine. Then let's see what happens when you get older. Okay, but if it doesn't go away, if it doesn't change, if one day when you're 33 years old and you look at a notebook that you had been writing in when you were maybe 17, and you're thinking as soon as you open it, you're going to see this naive version of yourself that's a teenager that is still writing from some space of confusion and teenage hormones and something that hasn't come into clarity, and then you read the things that you wrote and you're looking at it like, oh, it's still the same thing. It's still saying the same thing. Okay, so yeah, something of it had already gotten it. It hasn't changed. That's still the same way I might say it, even if I have more words or more ways of integrating it. The first time that I noticed something was when I was 5, and it was the vibrations. The same types of vibrations that I felt after I was struck by lightning and after my first inner dance, and I would have waves of it when I was young as well. Sometimes I would stand up and I would reach for something and my whole body would just move into these tingles and these sensations of not quite vertigo, but something that is imbalancing because your body becomes weak and it's just about to collapse because the energy surging through it is so intense. And this experience when I was 5 was at an evangelistical service, and it was in a high school auditorium in Westchester, New York. And I went with my mom, and I think my grandma was there. And my grandma had introduced this to my mom and told her about it, and so we went one night. It was the first time I had seen a live band, and it was fascinating. And it wasn't even that there were that many people. I think it was just the drummer, a guitarist, and a woman singing with her tambourine. And yet she was so alive up on stage, and all these hallelujah songs with a drummer playing along to them and feeling like it's rocking out, and everybody is getting really excited about the music. It was the music that really started it. And so the music held something. It holds this vibration that is so amazing to experience when it's not now about the music or the musician, but about the way the sound enters into you and starts circulating through you and changing the frequency of how energy is held in your system. And I could feel it, and then I could feel myself vibrating. And I was super high in this vibration of the music and the way that everything just seemed to flow, and that all of these people seemed to be in some type of a collective space, a collective trance of sorts. And that when this woman came around and started to do healing and calling people out from the audience and inviting them to stand and let her pray for them and put her hand on their forehead, and then somebody behind them would catch them because they'd fall down in the Holy Spirit. It was too small of a service and it wasn't being recorded, so there was no reason for it not to be real or for these people to be actors. I observed so many of these miraculous healings when I was young. You almost get numb to it. But in that first time, there was no numbing. There was no sense that this was fake. You could feel how real it was. And I wanted to do it. And I wanted to go do this falling down the Holy Spirit thing. So towards the end of the service, when she had invited anyone who wanted to give their life to Jesus, not knowing what that meant, but knowing that then she would go around and pray for us and do the hand on her forehead thing, I was okay with that. So I dragged my mom, come on, let's go do this. And then we get down to the front and she does her prayers, and then after that she comes around and I'm very excited. I can't wait for her to come up to me. And when she finally gets there and I'm standing and waiting for her to put her hand on my forehead, she goes to put her hand on my forehead, and the energy is really strong, and strong enough that like she's not putting her hand on my forehead and she's almost backing away, like whoa. And then, okay, so I'm waiting and I'm still really excited, and then she comes to go over again, and the same kind of thing. There's just so much energy that she can't put her hand on my forehead without feeling as though that doesn't make sense or that there's something else happening here. So she calls her partner, and he comes over and to kind of like check this out sort of thing. And then so for the third time she goes to put her hand on my forehead, and more just now she's just like feeling the energy field, and what it's like to be in that field is quite strong apparently, because then she doesn't ever go over to me to put her hand on my forehead, and instead she just kneels down in front of me and asks me my name and then says, "You're a very special little girl." And that's great and everything, but okay, you're gonna put your hand on my forehead, right? And no, she stood up and then she started talking to my mom and then prayed for my mom and then moved on. And I didn't remember that was what it was like to go through that moment until many years later, but reconnecting it and noticing how it was I had felt afterwards, and how my body felt like it was vibrating, not just for the rest of that night, but maybe for the next couple of days. And that every time I went to these services, in the beginning when I would first go, that's what it was like. And I would have the biggest smile on my face afterwards, and I could just feel so high. And that high would last for a while. That there was a connection to it. That God was the connection. That there was something that God represented in me that I knew that I was connected to, that was very vibratory. And it was God is this vibration. This vibration is what God is. And I feel it, and I know it because it's not new. But how do you make that visible? How do you share what that is like when you also feel it in the trees and the grass and the butterflies and the stream and the water and the fish and everything else that is also here? That you hear it speaking to you and you're speaking back to it, and as soon as you make those types of connections, you have things happen. The animals come over to you. The birds fly so close to you that it's almost like you're not there, and sometimes wings literally brush across your face, or they'll sit on your head, and they don't know that you're a human. They don't know the difference. That there's just these connections with babies, and that space that says we're not separate. Like, I get this universe that you're in so much that you see that I'm also in that universe with you, and now there's an awareness that we're still one, and your uniqueness and your sense of this universe is so strong that I'm there with you. And then many other things that seemed quite strange, weird, psychic, or paranormal, to the point that when I was in university, it was when people first started to call me a witch. And for the last 7 years that I had lived in the US, then witch was the word because it didn't make sense and people were scared. Not because of me, but because of the things they couldn't understand or explain. And if you can't explain things that are happening, sometimes it's easier to just label a person with something so that it makes sense instead of it being abstract or too mystical that it's impossible to believe. So those moments were sometimes scary, sometimes sad, a lot of the times just really happy, and many times based only on that sense of intuition, knowing that there's something that's awake, there's something that's alive, there's something that gets whatever it gets, but it's chosen to stop getting the thing that seems to be not it. That when it goes through a childhood of many traumas and many abusive and neglectful situations and a lot of pain and a lot of what feels like aloneness and a very strong sense of sadness in that it's only what it is we hold on ourself that makes it what it is. That if I hold that these are my traumas, this is my story is traumatic, and therefore I live my life based on what it is that I perceive my story to be, and everyone else should believe that I get to live the way I want to live it because this is what my story says. I had to dissolve my story. I had to let go of what my story said, whether it's everything that I've even just shared or all of the other things that I'm not sharing, because all of those things are the things that are part of a narrative that relates to what it looks like to dissolve yourself in order to allow yourself to be awake. To be awake means that you choose to change what it is that you're holding, if it was something that you were holding against yourself or against someone else or in relation to a belief or condition or a system or a government. It doesn't matter what it is, but if it's not seen as true inside of you, then it still has space to grow. And in those spaces that we have for growth to happen, it's how we become more aware. And in our awareness, we become more awake and we become more alive and we become more connected. We get to desensitize ourselves to the personal sensitivities, which makes us more sensitive to the whole of the vibration of all of it, to the way that everything is vibrating and to the way that energy is connected to every piece of this, that there's no one way to be awake or enlightened, but that only in the process of going into it together might we know anything about ourselves. That in this way that now I go about holding space internationally for a lot of these different processes and community openings and support for people in many different ways, that this is how I learn more. That I won't ever feel like I'm ever awake until everyone feels like they're awake, until there's a space for which we can connect to each other in this consciousness of knowing and intuition that says we're not different from one another, and there's never was a difference for us to have. It was always connected. We were always the same. That's awakening. And so until it goes to that space, then keep waking up. Keep waking, and I'll keep waking. We'll see what happens when we get there.